agenda is this. Kevin is going to kick it off. He's going to talk about sort of diversity, just the definition, and how it's sort of a loaded word. He's going to talk about representation of minorities in media. He'll talk about why it's important, both from a self-esteem standpoint for kids and adults, but also how it's important for businesses, like, you know, Netflix and Disney and all the people who are making media. And then finally, what we as a group can do. So I'm going to talk about 6 things that we can do as a group to really, I think, bolster diversity in all the work that we're doing. So, Kevin, it's all you.
So when we hear the word diversity, there are a lot of things that come up. This is a video of what diversity is not. And so if you're familiar with The Office, this is a cute clip. When we look at the definitions of diversity, we need to associate with diversity, we need to understand that it's not a one-size-fits-all. Oftentimes when we hear people talk about diversity, and we assume that it's about race, it's about ethnicity, and it's about culture, and we lump them together. But what we should do is think about race as really the physical characteristics of a people. Skin tone, hair color, eye color, those are the things that identify people through or race. Ethnicity focuses much more on cultural factors like nationality, regional culture, ancestry, language. And then culture specifically gets at customs, beliefs, arts. And the reason I point these 3 out is when we talk about it sometimes, we lump them together. And when we do that, we sometimes miss context, right? So my brother, I'm an identical twin, and my brother went to Brazil. He lived in Brazil for 3 years. And he came back and said, in Brazil, they have it's not just black or white. They have 15 designations based on your hair texture, based on a whole bunch of different things. And so he came back one time, he said, guess what? I'm not black in Brazil. And I was like, what? He said, yeah. He's like, Pele, the soccer player, he's not black. I'm like, really? And so because they make differentiations based on those 3 things, not just one, like skin color. And so the reason that is important is because when we begin to have discussions about diversity and inclusion, we need to understand what those distinctions are. Okay? So diversity is about the numbers, right? Who's in the room? We count, women, we count people of color. Inclusion is about power, and it's about opportunity. So of the people in the room, who has the opportunity or power to make a decision? And so this often comes up because we talk about diversity and people want to be diverse, and so they do the United Nations approach, right? They have one of this, one of that, one, and they assemble them and they say, look, we're diverse. But then none of those people have power. Or only one person has the power, and everybody else is there just to kind of give their opinion. So when we talk about diversity and inclusion, we need to understand that the inclusive part is the dynamic that adds the power to it. The power for somebody to say, no, that's offensive, and we're not going to make that show, or we're not going to, that scene needs to be cut, okay? So from a research standpoint, there are a few reports that I'm going to highlight that really get at some of these issues of diversity and inclusion. So the first one is when you look at the number of white leads in roles. So this is taken from the UCLA study from the Ralph Bunche Center done by Darnell Hunt. It's called Hollywood Diversity, and it's always Hollywood Diversity : something, depending on the year. But what you see is that the top blue line represents the percentage of white leads, and then the middle gray line represents the U.S. population. Hi, Donna. And the bottom red line represents minorities. And so what you see is that clearly whites are over indexed in terms relative to the U.S. population, and minorities are under indexed. And so you would hope that at least you would have minority participation to the level of the U.S. population, or according to the census, but that clearly isn't. And so it's seven times what you see in other categories. And so that's an issue. Now, this slide, which is very interesting, it looks at the number of shows without a black or Asian speaking character. Okay? And so I'm not sure if you can see it, but there are some kind of reddish squares, and then there's a red square that's cut in half, and the other part is orange. And what that shows you is the orange are the shows that have no black speaking characters, and the red are the shows that have no Asian speaking characters. And then when you see them combined, that's where you get the hash. And so for cable, you'll see that about 51% have either no speaking black characters or no speaking Asian characters. And then when you go to streaming, you see that there are 63%. Now, this is important because when you look at media, you know who is important by what they do in the show, what happens on the screen, who's talking, who's the first one in, who's the hero, who's gonna live to the end of the episode, right? I mean, right, because you know, brother always gets it first. So, but that tells you the importance of that character. And if you see the same characters all the time, not talking, not lasting to the end of the episode, then you start expecting it, right? And you start thinking, oh, that character's not important. That character's not going to be here, for episode 2. So when you look at writing, in the writer's room, 2/3 of shows do not have any black writers. And then only 17% of shows only have one black writer. And so now jump back to what my discussion on diversity versus inclusion. So you're in a writer's room, and there's one black person, and that person is oftentimes seen as the representative, right, for either black people or people of color in general. And then on top of that, they may not have the power to say, no, this is offensive and I don't think we should do this. Or they may be overruled. And so when we look at the composition of writers' rooms, we need to understand that the more diverse it is, the more authentic representation we get, instead of just one kind of myopic approach. Minority creators are underrepresented by a factor of 17 to 1. So you see for digital scripted programs, this is 2013, 2014 data, only 6% of the show creators were minority. Now what's interesting is that what you're not seeing is they also looked at what the diversity of a show is when the creator is minority. And what's interesting, when the creator is minority, the show is much more diverse, right? And so it stands to reason that if you want to have diversity throughout your shows, then you would try and get more creators of color. Not that it can't be the other way, but typically we tap the networks that we know, right? You call the people that you know, say, hey, I got a show, come work. And so we need to kind of begin to get out of that and say, no, I'm going to call someone else. I'm going to make an effort to be diverse. underrepresented directors by media service. So here, you can see it in green. The percentage of white directors, 90%, 90.4% for broadcast, right? For streaming, it's 88.6%. The percentage of minority directors, cable has the highest at 16.8%. So when you look at, I don't know if you watch, one of my favorite shows is Queen Sugar. And I watch credits because for me, watching credits is like when someone gives you a restaurant recommendation, you ask you say, well, who is that person? What kind of food do they like, right? Because somebody might say, this restaurant is really good, but you know that person doesn't like spicy food, but I like spicy food, so I'm like, I don't know. Their recommendation might be kind of shaky. And so when you look at minority directors, you need to get a sense of, well, who's making this? And with Queen Sugar, what's interesting is that if you watch the credits, you'll see that if not every week or every couple of weeks, there's a new director. And these are directors of color that you would not see other places. So then you ask yourself the question, how is it that Ava DuVernay is able to find and employ these directors of color, but other people can't? Does she have like a pipeline that nobody else has? And the answer is no, is that she takes the chance and she gives people these opportunities. So why does this all matter? And as the father of now an 18-year-old and a 14-year-old, the reason I started kind of getting into children's media is when my children were young, they wanted to watch a lot of the children's media. And so I would sit and watch it with them. And some of it was really good and some of it was really bad. And so I said, this is crazy. I'm not going to just sit here and let my kids watch this. You know, I'm going to do something about it. Because I understood that TV has an impact on young people. And so one is that studies have found that it lowers the self-esteem of black boys and girls and white girls. And so this is actually a study out of done in Indiana, and it involved 400 kids, elementary school kids, 9 to 12 years old, and it was longitudinal. It was over a year. And so what it found is that the more the child watched TV, the lower their self-esteem got. And for white males, it was the exact opposite. The higher their self-esteem got. And this is not, to me, it's not rocket science, right? If you see yourself depicted in negative ways over and over and over, then you're going to begin to question. And so what's interesting is that Latino and African American youth consume or are exposed to about 13 hours of media per day. So imagine 13 hours a day, you're getting messages about you specifically, or your race or your gender. We did a study called the Digital Live Study, where we surveyed over 1,000 teens and tweens. And what we found is that they are often exposed to negative content. 30% of the time it's related to race, and 25% of the time it's related to gender. And so when you think about that, and you think about 13 hours a day, that's a lot. And that's a lot to be exposed to for it not to have an impact on you. And so not only is it impacting the youth themselves, but it's also then impacting the people around them and their view of those youth. And so when if you're white or Asian or Latino or black, and you see these constant images, right? And then you encounter me in the wild, then you say, oh my God, that's that, you click and you think that I am the image that you have seen, and which may cause you to do something that may impact me negatively, right? It may cause you to judge me prematurely and not give me that mortgage so that I can't live in that house and send my kids to that school. Or it may cause you to react too quickly and pull me over or whatever. And so we need to understand that media has an impact not just for the children who are consuming it, but then for everyone else in society who is seeing it. And so that's why one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about it, and why I think media creators need to begin to think about that. This is a short video referring to the Kenneth Clark doll studies from the 1950s, where he put black dolls in front of, and in his study, he put them in front of black children and white children, and both groups of children identified the black doll as the one that was ugly, the one that was bad. All the negative attributes went to the black doll. And so the crushing part of that is that even the black children did not or saw the black dolls as negative. And so we need to understand that that media can have this impact on our young people. And then it's reinforced by other forms of media, whether it's a doll, whether it's books. Every time, my daughter is 14 now, but she wanted a princess book, wanted me to read a princess book to her when she was 5. And I remember driving from Washington, D.C., from Arlington, Virginia to Baltimore, Maryland, to get her a princess book that had a princess that looked like her. And, when children do not see themselves, then they begin to think, well, there must be a reason, and I must not be valued. But when we do show those images, we have to be aware of the context. So the fact that in elementary school, the first time black history is taught, it starts with slavery. It just bothers me. And both my kids, when they got to that point, I knew when it was. I would show up at the school and say, okay, I'm here. I'm going to do black history all month, all February. Because I didn't want, and this is not just for my kids, but for other kids. I don't want people saying, oh, black people started. They came, slavery was the beginning. And it's like, no, it's not. And the civil rights era is not the end, right? And so we need to be careful of the context in which we present it, because people are saying, oh, we're talking about Martin Luther King. I'm like, okay, yeah. And George Washington Carver. Okay, what else? And why aren't we doing this all year? Okay. And so this is the other reason. When we begin to think about why, and we look at, everybody knows this demographic trend, and the reality is that as we get closer and closer, we find that people want to see themselves. And so either you will provide the content or they will make the content themselves. And when record companies in the 80s were not letting black artists have their own labels, what happened? People started bootlegging. They started selling CDs, or actually not CDs, cassettes, out of the trunks of their car. Master P is the person who started it, and out of that you get Jay-Z and all these people now who have their own record labels, and those six large record companies don't exist. I mean, Sony now still exists, but it's a multimedia company. But BMG, all of them don't exist. And so as we get closer and closer to this majority-minority, we need to, or minority-majority, we need to understand that if the content isn't there, they're going to make it. And so either you get with the program or you watch as people find a way to make their own content. And with technology going the way it is, it's so easy to make media these days. That barrier is going to be down. When we look at mobile, this is another opportunity. We see that Asians are the highest in terms of accessing and using mobile, and followed by Hispanic and African Americans or blacks. And so when we look at mobile technology, we should try and make those communities a part, right, of that. Organizations, especially media organizations, are beginning to think about how we can capitalize and exploit mobile. And this could be an opportunity to do it in a way that diversifies their content offerings. And then lastly, when we look at blacks and Hispanics in terms of media use, and this is what I've alluded to, is that total media exposure for black and Hispanics is about 13 hours as opposed to 8 hours for whites, right? And then you see the amount of TV content, the amount of music. And so the lesson here is that you have diverse populations, people of color, over-indexing in exposure and consumption of media. And so in order to meet their needs, we need to figure out a way to create content that represents their story and is authentic and is relevant to their experience. And then money, because I'm not naive. I know that money is always a part of the equation. But see, here you can see the buying power. These groups have money, and they will spend the money on things that they see as important and relevant. And so the argument that I often make is that this isn't an altruistic, do-gooder cause. This is economics, and this is business. And so hopefully, when you look at the buying potential of these communities, you can see that this is a win-win situation. So what can we do? Shira's gonna tell us that.
Okay. So I think most people in this room are here tonight in Santa Clara, braving traffic, hungry maybe even, because I think all of us have an activist in us about media and inclusion. And so I'm going to talk about 6 things that we can do as a group to really further this cause. So 1, celebrate the unique contributions of different groups and avoid stereotypes when we're making media. All right, so for example, I give this example because I work at this place, but Netflix put out a campaign called The First Time I Saw Me. And the idea was they showed celebrities and people who were influencers talking about the first time they saw themselves on screen. So I'm going to show you a video. I'm hoping the sound works, but this is of a woman named Jackie Cruz, who plays Flocka on Orange is the New Black. Do you know the show?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, let's see if we can do it. No. All right, I'll act it out. So the person asks her, "When was the first time you saw yourself?" And she says, "I," and she doesn't know. She cannot think of a character of color that she could identify with that she saw when she was young. And I mean, she's an actor, so this is like her profession, and she could not think of one. I wish you could see it. I secretly want to go in here and get it right now, just see if it'll work. Just to see. But I feel like it's probably worthy. Oh, okay. Let's do this. So.
Yeah, you missed some of the link. You only copied some of it.
It's okay. Actually, I'm going to go back to present mode. I'm actually just trying to get there. Does anyone have an idea about how I would do that? Because I can't click it on here. You see what I mean? It's not like in the screen. It's not in view.
It's far out to the...
It's too far to the right, yeah. Oh. Thank you so much. I'm not going to try to play video. But it was a really effective campaign. And so celebrities of all kinds really put out videos, and we got tons of tweets from it. So also we have to resist common stereotypes about blackness and whiteness. So you think about a wedding dress, it's white. All kinds of things associated with marriage, goodness, white, purity, right? Cowboy hats, they are typically white. The good guys wore white. And then you think about the bad guys, like the quintessential bad guy, Darth Vader, is black. And I Googled something like black hats, and this is what I got. The Jack Daniels villain hat tonight, right? It says the word villain in it. So I think that says so much about how we think about colors like that. They just put out a study of Disney titles, and they showed how different colors, characters of different colors, like the attributes associated with them. And the ones that were dark, I think things were evil, sinister. There were some other ones that I can't remember. And then the ones that were white and red and yellow, all very positive things. So it's not even subtle. And Goonies. So you remember the Goonies. I love this movie, but I kind of like look back on it with a bit of shame when I think about these stereotypes. So let's take Rosalita. You know, she's kind of the heroine in the end because she finds all the gems. Her name is Lupe Ontiveros. She actually died in 2012. Before she died, she said she played a maid 150 times. So throughout her career, she was cast as a maid 150 times. And she said on her deathbed, I wanted to play something else. I wanted to be something different, but that's how I could get my jobs. And then you take Data, right? He's great. What a great character. But he is the math and science nerd. He has the gadgets. We make fun of his accent in this movie so many times. He's sneaky. He has this trench coat, right? He has this trench coat, and he is not a love interest. So he's like reinforcing every single stereotype about Asians. 16 Candles, too. I was just thinking about Long Duck Dong in that movie. I mean, go back and watch. But these are just like so ingrained. Okay, so at Common Sense Media, I remember probably 2011 or so, developers would come meet with us. And one of my colleagues on staff, she happens to be African American, she'd say, all the avatars of these games are white. You can change the nose, you can change the hair, but the skin color is white, white, white. So I said, well, we're at Common Sense Media, we can actually give them feedback. So we did. We said, why are these people all looking the same? Not just white, but like there was no one even who looked punky or, you know, had a different body shape or anything like that. I'm not saying it's because of us, but like these are the avatars that exist today, and I think they're a lot more diverse than we saw even in 2011. So we're seeing changes, we're seeing trends, we're seeing movement in this way. And of course, number two, we want to ensure that people see themselves on screen. So this goes back to our moments of when you were thinking about who you could identify with when you were young. And we talk about windows and mirrors. If you ever see a little kid looking at themselves in the mirror, seeing their reflection, they're really excited and they keep wanting to look back. You know, they look again and again and they can't believe it's them. It's important for them to see themselves. And so we say in media, it is really important for people to see others who have stories that they can relate to, but also different stories. And that's where the windows come in. And this is for all types of people, all races. If you can see the perspective of other people, their stories, it's as crucial as seeing your own. We think that in the industry we're moving in the right direction. These happen to be Netflix shows. I'm going to show some others in a few minutes. But all these shows have mixed casts, or they show different perspectives, different characters. So one is called Julie's Green Room. One is called Free Reign. It's about a girl who comes from the United States. She's, I think she's African American from the United States, but then she goes to Britain. And it's a story about fitting in there and how she's perceived. That's interesting. And then Project MC Squared, really it centers so much on STEM. So it's just these girls who happen to be different colors who are like all aligned about science. And Andy Mack on Disney, I think, does a great job with this. You have Peyton Lee, is the lead character there. And then I really wanted to play you this video, but I don't think it's going to happen today. But on the right, this is from Sesame. And Kelly and I, we have a friend named Mindy, and Mindy always talks about this. So there was a writer on Sesame Street, and he had a daughter who always was teased about her hair. And so she came home from school, she was African American, And she said, oh, people at school want to pull my hair. They say it's a weird texture, all these things. And so he said, we're going to make this piece on Sesame Street. And it's called I Love My Hair. And it's this like celebration of this girl's hair. It's awesome. If you get a chance, you should look it on YouTube, for example. And I just learned that at Netflix we were nominated 23 NAACP Image Awards. These are 3 examples. And it's important, to Kevin's point, they're across writing, directing, acting, creators, and apparently it's the most in the field, in the industry. So we're really happy about that because we've trying to make strides internally. Offer positive role models. This is really, really important. I'm sure people here are familiar with Doc McStuffins. So it's just a great show. But you have this little girl, she's 7, and she aspires to be a doctor like her mother, and she fixes toys and stuffed animals and things like that. But what's important is that you see her aspirations, you see her wanting to be professional, you see she has a role model who's doing something really great and important, and as Kevin says, she has a father too, which is often not the case in a lot of stories with African Americans. There's no father, right? So it's challenging all kinds of stereotypes. I think it's a great show. Not Netflix. And of course, tell complex stories. So I think people can tell when your story is one-dimensional, thin, and maybe when you didn't have that experience yourself as a writer or creator. So for example, there's this game called Never Alone, and it's about a native tribe in Alaska, the Inupiat, and this was co-made with that group of people. So 40 people from the tribe were interviewed, and all kinds of knowledge was gained about the landscape that they lived in, the customs, their culture, and you can play the game either from the perspective of the little girl or the fox. And I think the perspective taking there is really important because they both have different powers and different, I think, strengths and weaknesses, which is the same with everybody. It's a very beautifully done game, but I like it so much because it's so complex. And then you also get these little tidbits of wisdom from real videos of elders in that community embedded in the game that give you some information, tips about how to move forward in the game. So it's really incorporating real stories. Raising Dion, this has been announced, so I can talk about it, but this will be a Netflix show, and this little boy has superpowers. So he lives with his mom. She's a great mom, but she doesn't know he has these superpowers. So over time, she learns because weird stuff starts happening, and this is just not a story we see. It's just not. So this is actually quite groundbreaking, and I think a lot of other studios, my guess is passed on this one, simply because there's a kid of color in it.
Is it a kids show or kids and family show, or is it?
I would say family.
Okay.
A family, yeah, probably a little older. And also, sometimes you never know until shooting happens. You know what I mean? So it's hard, but yes, good question. And last, this is sort of the opposite, I would say, of that depth. But you remember the Benetton ads? Like, they were very much in the 80s. They'd put people just together, just smash all these random people together, and they'd be like, we are the United Colors of Benetton. It was like totally, effective campaign, but there wasn't much depth, because you're like, do those people know each other? I don't think so. Maybe. It's possible. But we don't have a story. We have no context for them being in that blanket. So I would say, think about if you're going to put people from maybe different backgrounds together, the story has to make sense and weave them together. And we must avoid pigeonholing minority creators in particular. So I think about Guillermo del Toro. He did Pan's Labyrinth, he did Troll Hunters, and he said, everyone tried to limit me to drama or comedy with a, quote, Latin slant. But I wanted to be free to explore my worlds the way any other filmmaker did. So oftentimes we do get the complaint from people who are from other countries or who are minorities in this country. They come in and they're like, I know you're going to expect me to do this, the story of the so-and-so people because I belong to those people. I don't want to do that. And so I think it's very, very important to be open to that and to make sure people who are talented